The calendar notification appeared on my screen at exactly 10:23 a.m. It wasn't loud. It didn't flash or buzz. It just sat there quietly, like a warning you don't fully understand until it's too late. Career development conversation, 40:00 p.m., no agenda. No explanation. Just a private executive conference room and human resources listed as an attendee. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. In my 13 years at Catalyst Enterprises, a mid-sized pharmaceutical distribution company, I had seen this meeting before. Not for myself but for others. 7 times. To be exact. Every single time, the wording was the same. Every single time, the person never returned to their desk. People think firings are dramatic. They imagine raised voices, slammed doors, emotional goodbyes. The truth is quieter. The truth is a vague calendar invite and a room with no windows. My name is Sadi Barrett. I'm 41 years old, and for over a decade, I've worked in a role most people don't understand until something goes wrong. My title is Senior Regulatory Compliance Officer. It's the kind of job that makes conversations die at networking events. I don't sell medicine. I don't market it. I make sure it doesn't hurt people. I track temperature logs for controlled substances. I verify safety documentation. I make sure federal reports match reality, not wishful thinking. My work isn't glamorous. But it keeps companies from losing their licenses, or worse, ending up on the wrong side of a federal investigation. And for the past 4 months, I had been saying no more than management liked. No, you can't skip documentation. No, you can't mark training as complete when it isn't. No, speed doesn't matter more than safety. Every no had been met with smiles, then tension, then silence. That morning, I packed the family photos from my cubicle into my bag before anyone arrived. Not because I was dramatic, but because I understood patterns. When you've been around long enough, you learn to read the weather before the storm breaks. I didn't panic. Panic comes from surprise. This wasn't a surprise. I sipped coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier and went back to work, finishing a compliance audit no one had asked for. Muscle memory took over. Professionals finish the job, even when they know the ending. At 3:47 p.m., I saved my final document. At 3:48, I backed it up to my personal cloud storage. At 3:50, I stood up from my desk. The office felt different. Conversations softened. Keyboards clicked a little faster. People avoided eye contact as I walked down the hallway. They knew. The walk to the executive conference room took 90 seconds. 90 seconds to feel like a warning sign. 90 seconds to understand I was about to become a lesson. Another name whispered around the office. What I didn't know yet was that someone else had already arrived. And by the time the clock struck 4, everything was about to change. The hallway felt longer than usual as I walked toward the executive conference room. Every step echoed louder in my head than it should have. Conversations faded behind me, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that followed like a shadow. Then I heard it. A sound so ordinary most people would ignore it. The security badge printer at the front desk. One mechanical beep, a short pause, then 2 more beeps in quick succession. 3 badges. 3 visitors. I slowed my pace without fully realizing why. My instincts, sharpened by years of paying attention to small details, told me something was wrong. Or maybe something was finally right. I glanced toward the glass wall that separated the hallway from the main lobby. 3 people stood at the reception desk. 2 men. 1 woman, all dressed in dark suits, all standing straight, confident, and completely uninterested in small talk. The woman wore a lanyard with a federal seal that made my stomach tighten the moment I saw it. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General. I knew that badge. You don't work in regulatory compliance for over a decade without memorizing which agencies can shut down your entire career with a single phone call. They weren't signing in like normal visitors, they were showing credentials. Real ones, the kind that don't ask for permission. The receptionist, Kelly, who had worked the front desk for years, picked up her phone. Her hand was shaking. Her voice carried just far enough for me to hear. "There are federal inspectors here," she whispered. "They're asking for the regulatory compliance officer. They say it's urgent." My heart didn't race, it sharpened. Fear feels chaotic. This felt precise. Recognition. I changed direction. instead of continuing toward the conference room where my firing was scheduled in 13 minutes. I walked toward the lobby. Every step felt deliberate, like a decision finally made after months of waiting. The woman with the federal badge turned as I approached. Her eyes were sharp, observant, already assessing. "Sadie Barrett?" she asked. "Yes." She extended her hand. Her grip was firm. "Professional, Special Agent Lydia Hoffman. Office of Inspector General. These are investigators Paul Donovan and Henry Wallace." Then she said the words that made everything else disappear. "We're here to conduct an unscheduled compliance inspection related to your company's recent federal filings." Behind me, hurried footsteps echoed. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Scarlett Pierce, Human Resources Director. Her face was flushed, her smile strained. "Excuse me," she said quickly. "Can I help you? We weren't notified of any inspection today." Agent Hoffman didn't even look surprised. "Federal inspections under statutory authority do not require advance notice," she replied calmly. "Your cooperation is mandatory." Scarlett opened her mouth, closed it, reached for her phone. "I need to inform the executive team." "You can do that," Hoffman said. "But first, we'll be speaking with Ms. Barrett." She turned back to me. "I assume there's a private room available." I nodded. "Conference room 3, I said. "This way." As we walked past Scarlett, I saw her typing frantically. Panic replacing professionalism. Within minutes, every executive in the building would know. Federal investigators had arrived. And they were sitting with the woman scheduled to be fired at 4 o'clock. For the first time all day, I felt something shift. The meeting I was walking toward no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the truth. Conference room 3 was small, windowless, and cold. The kind of room designed to keep conversations quiet and contained. The door closed behind us with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. Agent Hoffman took the seat at the head of the table. The 2 investigators sat on either side of her. I sat alone across from them. She opened her briefcase and placed a thick folder on the table. "Ms. Barrett," she said calmly, "we're going to be direct." She slid a document toward me. I recognized it immediately. Our most recent federal compliance report. My signature was at the bottom. "Did you personally verify every item in this report before you signed it?" she asked. I looked at the neat checkmarks, the perfect dates, the flawless formatting. On paper, everything looked clean. I looked back up at her. "No," I said. The silence that followed felt heavy. One of the investigators leaned forward. "Can you explain that?" "Yes," I said. "But before I do, I want to know if this conversation is being recorded." Agent Hoffman nodded. "Audio only?" "Good," I said. "Because what I'm about to say directly contradicts what my employer reported to your agency." I told them the truth. I explained how temperature alarms in the warehouse were triggered and never properly documented. How employees handling controlled substances had incomplete training that was quietly marked as finished. How safety audits were labeled complete when only partial walkthroughs had occurred. Every time I raised concerns, I was told to be flexible, to keep momentum moving, to stop slowing things down. I described meetings where my warnings were called technicalities, and emails where management encouraged me to just wording instead of fixing problems. Agent Hoffman's expression didn't change, but I could see her attention sharpen. "Why didn't you refuse to sign?" she asked. "I did. At first. I explained how. When I refused, reports were sent without my signature. Then how the process changed. Information came to me already altered. Boxes already checked. Dates already filled in. I signed what I was shown, only to later discover the underlying records didn't match. Then I said the sentence that changed everything. I was scheduled to be fired today." All 3 agents froze. "Today?" one asked. "Yes," I said. "In the executive conference room." "Why?" Agent Hoffman asked. "Because I wouldn't stop documenting these issues," I said. "Because I wouldn't sign off on false information." I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. "I can prove everything." I opened folders organized by date and category. Emails, internal memos, audit notes, screen stamps, every warning I had sent, every response dismissing it, every decision to ignore me. "Why did you keep all this?" one investigator asked. "Because I knew this moment would come," I said. "If not today, then someday." Agent Hoffman leaned back slightly, studying me. You understand that knowingly submitting false information to federal agencies is a crime, she said. Yes, I replied. That's why I refused. She closed the folder slowly. What you're describing, she said, is not a misunderstanding, it's a pattern. Then she stood. And if your employer attempts to terminate you while we're conducting this investigation, she continued, that becomes retaliation. Which is also a federal offense. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. The clock on the wall read 30:55 p.m., 5 minutes before my firing. Agent Hoffman walked to the door and opened it. Standing there was the CEO, confident, controlled, unaware that the story she had tried to bury was already being recorded. The knock on the door came at 30:55 p.m. Every head in the room turned. Agent Hoffman stood up and opened it. Sienna Whitfield, the CEO, stood in the hallway with her arms crossed and her jaw tight. She looked exactly like someone who was used to being in control, and furious that control had been interrupted. I'm Sienna Whitfield, she said sharply. I'd like to know why federal agents are in my building questioning employees without notifying executive leadership. Agent Hoffman didn't raise her voice. We don't require permission, she replied. We're operating under federal authority related to your company's compliance filings. Sienna's eyes flicked toward me. Something flashed across her face. Recognition, then annoyance. Is this about her? She asked. Agent Hoffman stepped fully into the doorway. This is about your company submitting false information to federal agencies. She said. Ms. Barrett is cooperating voluntarily. Sienna straightened. We had a meeting scheduled at 4. Cancel it, Hoffman said. The word landed like a gavel. There was a brief pause. Long enough for the clock to tick once, then twice. Sienna swallowed. Understood, she said tightly. She turned and walked away without another word. Her heels clicked down the hallway, sharp and fast, like a countdown that had already ended. Agent Hoffman closed the door. At 40:00 p.m., my firing meeting officially died. 5 minutes later, the office descended into chaos. Managers were summoned. Phones rang nonstop. Email notifications exploded across the building. People whispered in corners, eyes wide with fear. I returned to my desk as instructed. The calendar invitation disappeared without explanation. No reschedule, no apology, just gone. At 4:03 p.m., an email arrived from Human Resources. Please disregard the meeting scheduled for this afternoon. It has been postponed indefinitely. Indefinitely. I stared at the word for a long moment before archiving the message. By 4:45 p.m., the first domino fell. My direct supervisor was escorted into a conference room by investigators. She walked past my desk without looking at me, her face pale, her hands shaking. At 5:12 p.m., the operations manager was escorted out of the building carrying a cardboard box. No goodbye speech, no farewell email. Just security at his side. The building felt hollow by the time evening came. Most employees left early, afraid of being called in next. The federal investigators stayed. Through the glass walls, I watched them pull files, compare documents, and take notes. At 6:30 p.m., I packed my bag and headed for the parking lot. That's when my phone buzzed. An email from an unknown address. I work in accounting. It read, I just wanted to say thank you. I've seen things go wrong here for months and felt crazy for caring. Seeing you stand your ground reminded me that doing the right thing still matters. I sat in my car for several minutes, reading the message again and again. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. And for the first time in months, I drove home knowing I hadn't lost. I had outlasted them. The next morning, the parking lot was half empty. Cars that were always there by 8 were gone. People had called in sick. Some were scared. Others just didn't want to be anywhere near a building crawling with federal investigators. Inside, the atmosphere felt different. Heavy. Serious. The agents had taken over the largest conference room. Boxes of files lined the walls. Laptops were open. Names were written on whiteboards. This wasn't a routine inspection anymore. It was an investigation. At 9:30 a.m., I received an email from the chief financial officer requesting an urgent meeting. His office looked like someone who hadn't slept. Coffee cups stacked on his desk. Dark circles under his eyes. He didn't waste time. The board met last night, he said. We reviewed the documentation you provided. I nodded. You were right, he admitted. About everything, The words didn't bring satisfaction. Just confirmation, he continued. The CEO has been terminated effective immediately. Several executives are on administrative leave. We're bringing in outside auditors. And we need you. They offered authority, protection, a promotion. Not because they suddenly cared, but because the company was at risk of losing its federal license. Without compliance, the company would collapse. I agreed, on conditions. Full control over compliance, direct access to the board, no interference. They accepted without argument. Weeks passed. Then months. The investigation expanded. More agencies joined. Lawyers appeared. Interviews continued. Documents were pulled apart line by line. Then the phone call came. Criminal charges were being filed. Conspiracy, false statements, retaliation. Prison time was possible. The company paid millions in fines. Executives who once dismissed me now hired attorneys. Some resigned. Others disappeared from professional circles entirely. The company survived, but changed. I was promoted. I rebuilt the compliance department from scratch. People who believed rules were optional were replaced with people who understood responsibility. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a compliance conference. I almost said no. But I stood on that stage and told the truth. Not a polished version. The real one. About being ignored. About being threatened. About being scheduled for termination. When I finished, the room stood and applauded. Not because I was special, but because I had done what many were afraid to do. I had stayed. I had documented. I had refused to disappear. That evening, back in my office, I looked at the calendar. No meetings, no warnings, no threats, just work. She booked my firing for 40:00 p.m. By 40:05 the government stepped in, and sometimes that's all the time the truth needs. She scheduled my firing for 40:00 p.m., but before the clock hit 40:05, federal agents walked in, and nothing was ever the same.